Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Tuesday, August 18th. I am Gabriel Harber, and I'm here with Coach Cameron Nixon. What's going on, man?
Not much. Ready for maybe another good day of structure today. We shall talk about it.
Yeah, man, it's looking like there might be a little bit of a curveball from what you were sharing with me before we started recording. And I also
Yeah.
want to let all you folks know that we are making good on our promise of getting these forecast shows out to you even more often. You might have seen on social media or email, if you're part of our email list, that we put out a call for people who are interested in being a part of these forecast shows. So I figured I would just go ahead and throw it out there for all of you folks who are watching as well. If you are interested, there is a contact form link in the description below. Obviously, if you're watching right now, you know what this entails. You understand if you have the skills, the capabilities. So I'll leave that to all of your discretion. But the opportunity is there, and we are going to be asking people to do a one off trial show where you'll be recording a show with me, and then we'll go from there deciding who to actually hand out the opportunities to people. So that'll be pretty cool. If you're interested, link in the description below. So, Cameron, take it away. What are we looking at on the categorical today?
I don't know if you were paying attention, but last night Nebraska really woke up with this long track supercell, even produced a weak tornado and some awesome structure. So I hate to toot my own horn, but I think my forecast was pretty solid a couple nights ago. And so wondering if we repeat the same thing today. Not where we'd expect though, given most of this risk, at least as it is currently. See, we have a broad 2% tornado over kind of the Omaha, Kansas City to Salina area, and also some hatched hail risk. And this is kind of where I'm potentially looking at for some even better storm opportunities for y'all chasers. Not that things couldn't get interesting down here, but if we want our best shot at maybe a repeat of yesterday, I definitely think I'm kind of honing in on this area. So we'll talk about why that is. So, our broadly speaking, our ridge is finally breaking down. This is incredible to see. It's like the rain and the oasis. Like we're finally breaking this death ridge down little by little, and you can see all this broad flow making its way all the way down, even into a little bit of northern Kansas here too. Again, not a whole lot in the way of short waves, maybe some action here moving into eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. So would not be surprised to see storms there. Are they what we want though? We'll talk about that in a couple minutes.
And before we get to that, you folks should know that we had an incredible live stream that happened last night with John Bangoff from Weatherfront. He broke down all the awesome stuff that is happening with the best weather app in the industry, as far as I'm concerned. Android is out now, so if you've been waiting for that to release, this is your opportunity to click that link in the description below, get signed up, 7-day free trial, and that also gives you access to the program that you're looking at right now. Cameron has the browser app up. You get browser and desktop with that mobile subscription. So if you want to watch the full hour-long Q&A session, that'll be under the live tab on our YouTube channel. I'll also link that in the description below as well for people that want to watch that. All right, Cameron, let's dig into the forecast. What do you got for us?
Yes, sir. So let's look at how our surface pattern is projected to evolve throughout the course of the day. Low pressure forming kind of in the lee of the Rockies into western Kansas here. And you could see just that remnant northerly, even northeasterly flow from that cold frontal passage last night. Obviously, we're probably still dealing with sporadic convection this morning over much of this area from our activity last night. We did have several supercells in northern Nebraska making their way down south. So where exactly this outflow boundary slash stationary front, what have you, sets up here is really anyone's guess, but it should park it somewhere in northern Kansas, southern Nebraska. And I'll go into some potential positionings based on cams. Obviously, this would, I think, be the most synoptically evident area for potential convection initiation. But let's look at our dew points, and you can see that we still have this broad area of kind of this return flow north of this boundary here. So really, most of this area is going to be in play here, all the way from Des Moines out into the western Nebraska, northeast Colorado area. And I might even throw up some NAM cape here if I can actually find the NAM. Can't actually find the NAM here. Did they get rid of it already?
Oh no, I
Um,
know that was in the cards, but I wonder if the latest weather front update just ixnayed it
yeah,
already.
we might have just said sayonara to the NAM. Okay, I'll have to talk to John about that. Let's
Oh
look at
no,
our,
that's
our
ominous. I'll have to talk to John about
yeah,
that.
very interesting. So let's just throw out the NAM 3 kilometer because I think it's going to do the dues a little bit more justice out here. I'll show some her just for a absolute worst case scenario, but I really think it's over mixing this area. Again, that's a problem we usually have with the her. But you can see these dew points sloshed against the higher terrain here yield a cape in upwards of 3 to 4,000 here over much of northwest Kansas and to southwest Nebraska. And then you kind of have this remnant cape up even farther north into Omaha and Des Moines. But if I pluck a few soundings, you're going to see there's some significant differences in kind of the regimes that we're dealing with. So maybe let's pluck one up here out by Omaha. And we have a very moist surface with lots of low level cape here. Huge cape throughout the column, too. But we're definitely in kind of a moist regime here. Hodograph, I think, looks pretty spectacular if you like hail. Weak low level shear here, and increasing deep layer shear aloft. So definitely would not be surprised to see some hail up here. Only thing that concerns me is this potential for kind of a mini supercell mode. Again, this is a nuanced topic here, and there's a lot that goes into this. But I've seen some solutions for mini supercells, and I think it's because our LCLs are so low. This kind of inhibits parcels from expanding as they rise. We want parcels to expand and have a long time to rise before becoming buoyant. And some of these environments with really low LCLs and stupidly high low level cape can result in more miniature supercells as a result. But with that in mind, I definitely think we still have a hail risk up here. Not super enthused on the structure unless you kind of like a mini supercell threat. But I think the tornado chances are going to be fairly low given that relatively weak low level shear. Further south, though, is a different story. We can kind of pluck a sounding in kind of this wraparound region, kind of northeast of that low pressure center. And these are some awesome looking photographs here. Lots of low level curvature and some, quite frankly, spectacular looking skew-tees too. Lots of kind of moderately dry air aloft, a huge cape, relatively high dew points. This is a crazy structure sounding for this area for this time of year. Definitely would not be surprised if something were to fire in this region if it did something like last night's supercell. And that is going to be the big if. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we look at the cams. Further west, though, there's not a whole lot that could potentially force storms except for the high terrain here. And we're probably dealing with some kind of backdoor, dryline cold front feature. And so this region I'm actually somewhat interested in for perhaps the highest ceiling and most likely ceiling for some well structured chaseable supercells. Great looking photograph here again has some pretty nice curvature and strongly deep layer shear aloft. At least initially, we have relatively high bases, maybe struggling a little bit in the Cape department. But as these storms that form here move southeasterly into this impinging high Cape air mass here, some of these soundings that I plucked around the Goodland area are pretty intense. Lots of dry air near the surface, lots of Cape aloft, and again, very strong shear. That this is again a result of that jet stream finally buckling south. And now we again have awesome supercell kinematics here. So even though this sounding isn't as, I guess, sexy as the sounding I pulled earlier, closer to Kansas City, I think this has a better potential of actually verifying and a supercell kind of strolling into this environment in the early evening. So I would think if anything had the truest potential to repeat what last night did, I think it would be somewhere around here from Yuma down to Goodland here.
Okay, so you mentioned that you really don't want those low LCLs because your parcels don't have time to actually expand as they're heading upwards. Does that just
Yes.
mean, is that another way of saying that or thinking of that, that they're still too warm when they actually hit that LCL level? Do you want them to cool with the dry adiabatic lapse rate for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I think I Not necessarily. I think everything just matters in relativity, right? And so, like, when you're this sounding here, honestly, I think it's a good thing that you are much warmer than the background environment, right? You're going to create buoyancy here. I think the biggest deal here is that this is actually really new research coming from Sam Brandt and John Peters, is when you encounter very high cape, you stop expanding and you start stretching upwards. You take whatever column you have and stretch it vigorously in the vertical, and you stop widening. And what deeper boundary layers do is that they allow an air parcel or a thermal more time to expand as they rise. And so you end up with bigger cloud bases. Definitely check out my how to skew T video. I explain this in some fashion. But what this means to you as chasers is a thermo profile that I often see really struggle to produce good storms is one like this, which has very low LCLs, but very dry air loft. So you force these really scrawny updrafts that try to get in here in this dry air mass here and then just immediately evaporate, which is really counterintuitive because there's a boatload of cape above here. But it's just this really moist, shallow layer below, very dry layer here that just is not worked out well, at least for me, chasing wise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that I'm trying to conceptualize that smaller, less expansive column. And it seems like that
Yeah.
might also be touching on some of the other work that they're doing, Sam and John, into entrainment cape.
Yes. Yeah. And so if we pluck, maybe let's do a difference between that and up here. This is actually why I think we will get big, robust supercells here, is because we have such a deep, well mixed boundary layer. And these thermals have almost 2 kilometers to rise and expand before they grow into storms. And of course, you also have kind of this backdoor cold frontal forcing here too. And to your point, this scenario would help a storm realize more of this cape here because you have wider updrafts that are less susceptible to entrainment. So while I might be a little bit optimistic for storms here, these are kind of my reasons why.
One last thing I wanted to ask you about, and this comes directly from the SPC Outlook when I was reading through it. They seemed like they weren't super confident in the early morning convection, which I know we'll get to in just a second with cam versus cams, but just from a
Yes.
conceptual standpoint, they also mentioned that a lot of what was going to give severe storms their potential in the 2% area was going to be remnant outflow boundaries that were left from potential early morning convection. So, can you have scenarios like this where a lot of times we think of early morning convection as not necessarily being great because maybe it slows down diurnal heating and kind of washes out the environment. But I'm guessing that in some instances, you actually really need that early morning convection because if not, you're not going to have any sort of forcing mechanism later in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think exactly. We have this broad region here in northern Kansas potentially later this afternoon that has just awesome ingredients for supercells, even tornado potential. And it's just, do we pop storms in this environment at all? I think is a big question. And the reason why I'm kind of sketched out about this area is A, that we have too weak of forcing, and B, it seems like most of our forcing here is actually along this kind of dry line type feature here down into southwest Kansas. And the environment ahead of here really is not great. I'm going to pluck a sounding here right along this forcing feature, and you can see we're just dealing with stupidly high LCLs, very minimal cape, and minimal shear. And when we get into cam versus cam, we'll see that a lot of cams actually fire stuff around here, but they don't end up being very interesting.
Excellent explanation, sir. Reminder, folks, if you are enjoying these shows that we put out on a regular basis, that channel membership button, the join button, is right below this video. We would greatly appreciate it. It's $3 per month. You can check out all the awesome perks by clicking that button. Time for Cam vs. Cams. Let's see what's going on out there.
Let's do it. So let's see if her is a believer or a non-believer, and I think I have some inklings of intuitions already. Her has most of the kind of supercells well up here into Nebraska, but maybe some signal for one of these supercells here in this area where I actually really liked. Even has a relatively long-lived storm. We can pluck a sounding from the her is probably very dry with some, yeah, steep low level lapse rates, but this would definitely cut it for some good long-lived supercell potential with even swaths of hail, potentially even significant severe hail. So definitely like that environment here. Her is less enthusiastic though about this target in Kansas, that kind of triple point area firing. But again, it's just largely this crap vection here initiating off this kind of deeper, well-mixed boundary layer. Maybe some upscale growth later into a cluster, but not super enthusiastic. We could go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum and look at the NAM. NAM is actually a model that made me really believe in this kind of Colorado target. Also has that kind of North Platte supercell as well, but has a long track supercell kind of through Northeast Colorado into that high cape and dry air mass. Definitely would not be surprised to see some awesome structure coming out of that area. It has a very similar evolution though into Northeast Kansas, just a blob forming off the tip of that warm sector and just escalating into some garbage MCS. Geez, even more 4 a.m. activity out here. We could look at let's just try giving the RFS some love here, the old version, because I don't think it's going to be this egregious today. It says basically the same thing that the NAM said. Convection kind of firing almost looks elevated here over the Kansas City area, and then a supercell or two emanating out of Colorado.
Remember to check out those links in the description below, and then watch another video.